They may have silver hair and a collection of grandchildren. They may wear reading glasses and knit sweaters by hand, but don't let the soft smiles and quiet wisdom fool you. Grandmas over 60 are still vibrant, alive, and deeply emotional beings who haven't turned off their desire for connection, attention, or affection just because the calendar flipped a few more decades. And what many men fail to realize is that just because a woman ages doesn't mean her needs vanish. In fact, for many grandmothers, their emotional, physical, and even romantic cravings intensify with age, not because they're clinging to youth, but because they've gained clarity on what truly matters. And when you strip away the games, the performance, and the distractions of younger years, what remains is raw, honest longing for real companionship, for meaningful attention, for touch that's intentional and not rushed, for compliments that come from the soul and not out of obligation, for laughter that lights up a room and eye contact that lasts more than a second. Because at this age, they're not looking for someone to rescue them. They're looking for someone to see them. And this is where so many men miss the mark. They assume that aging women become desensitized or uninterested in intimacy. But if you were to sit with a group of grandmas and truly listen to what they whisper to their closest friends, or admit in late-night chats with their daughters, or scribble in their secret journals, you'd find that what they crave most isn't youth. It's effort, presence, admiration, and a return to the kind of attention that made them feel like a woman in full bloom. Because aging hasn't dulled their feminine energy, it's just made it deeper, more nuanced, more attuned to authenticity. And while the world may joke about older women being past their prime, the truth is that their prime is often right now. Not in the surface-level beauty of their 20s, but in the rich, seasoned self-awareness. That only comes from years of loving, losing, nurturing, surviving, forgiving, and growing. And if a man truly wants to reconnect with his partner after 60, or spark something beautiful with a woman who's lived a full life, he must stop treating her like she's delicate porcelain or someone who's finished living passionately. Instead, he must look at her as someone who has more to give than ever before. And that begins with simple gestures that carry deep weight, like asking her what makes her feel beautiful now, what dreams she still wants to chase, what memories she treasures most, and what touch makes her feel safe, seen, and sexy. Because yes, grandmas still want to feel sexy, not necessarily in the way of flashy clothes or wild escapades, but in the way of being desired, of having their neck kissed unexpectedly in the kitchen, of hearing a genuine compliment whispered in bed, of feeling that their presence still stirs something in the heart of the man they care about. And one of the most common confessions among older women is that they miss feeling pursued, not necessarily in a dramatic or exhausting way, but with intention, with curiosity, with the kind of attentive interest that says, "You matter to me," and it's not about flowers or grand gestures, but about a steady stream of presence. Texting her just to say you thought about her smile, noticing when she wears a new shade of lipstick, remembering the story she told you about her favorite childhood summer, or sitting quietly with her on the porch while holding her hand like it's the first time all over again. Because what older women crave isn't youth or perfection or endless stimulation. They crave to be chosen, even now, especially now, because after a lifetime of being caretakers, mothers, wives, and supporters, they want to be with someone who sees them as more than a grandmother figure. They want to be with someone who still sees their glow, their mystery, their tenderness, and yes, even their sensuality, which doesn't disappear with age. It just becomes more inward, more emotionally linked, more tied to how respected and appreciated they feel. And when you listen to them speak from the heart, it becomes crystal clear that what they long for most is emotional intimacy. The kind that's forged through vulnerability, real conversations, shared silence, and mutual trust, not through shallow exchanges or surface compliments. And for many grandmas, That emotional connection is the foundation for physical closeness, meaning if you want to hold her body again, you must first hold her spirit. And the men who truly master this know that the greatest aphrodisiac for a woman after 60 is being made to feel special, safe, and desired, not out of habit or duty, but out of genuine appreciation for the journey she's walked and the depth she now carries, because she's not naive anymore. She knows what neglect feels like. She recognizes emotional laziness, and she won't settle for crumbs when she knows how satisfying a full emotional meal can be. And she craves warmth not just in bed, but in conversation. She longs for laughter that makes her belly shake and for shared memories that get better every time you retell them. And most of all, she desires emotional bravery, the kind of honesty that says, "I'm still learning you every day, and I love that." And while some might dismiss this as sentimental fluff, those who've experienced love after 60 know that it's where the real magic lies. Because the passion of youth is often chaotic and fleeting, but the passion of seasoned love is rooted, patient, powerful, and profoundly fulfilling. And so, when grandmas confess what they still crave from a man after 60, it's not the superficial stuff. It's connection, admiration, trust, warmth, sensual touch, emotional depth, and the kind of attention that makes them feel radiant, alive, and cherished not despite their age, but because of the woman they've become through it. And as we continue to peel back the layers of what grandmas over 60 truly long for deep in their hearts, it becomes even more evident that the things they crave aren't grand or unattainable. They're often beautifully simple, timeless, and profoundly emotional, beginning with one of the most overlooked but intensely desired experiences, a sense of being truly listened to without interruption or judgment. Because for decades, many women have lived lives where they've poured their time and energy into others, into children, husbands, parents, jobs, community roles, and somewhere along the line, they got used to speaking but not always being heard. So now, when a man leans in and listens with genuine curiosity, with his phone down and his eyes fully present, she feels something awaken inside her, because being listened to is about more than just hearing her words. It's about acknowledging her experiences, her wisdom, her humor, her dreams, and her pain without rushing to fix, dismiss, or compare. And many women in their 60s and beyond say that one of the deepest forms of intimacy they now crave is conversation that's not about logistics or chores, but about feelings, memories, passions, even fears, because it's in those raw, tender exchanges where emotional nakedness happens. And yes, emotional nakedness is often the precursor to physical closeness. And the man who creates that safe space becomes more than just a partner. He becomes a source of joy, healing, and desire. And contrary to what some believe, the desire to be touched and held does not fade with age, but it evolves into something more refined, more about quality than quantity, more about intention than urgency. And many grandmothers admit privately that they miss being caressed, kissed slowly, held tightly after a long day, or even just having their hair brushed back while someone tells them they're beautiful. And they don't want to initiate every time. They want to be surprised by closeness, by a warm hand reaching for theirs, by arms wrapping around them from behind while they wash the dishes, by a soft kiss on the forehead just before sleep. Because these moments remind them they're not just useful, they're still lovable, still desired, and very much alive in a body that carries decades of strength, stretch marks, softness, and stories. And when a man touches her not out of routine, but out of reverence, it changes everything. Her breathing slows, her eyes soften, her body opens, and most importantly, her heart begins to trust again. Because trust is another massive craving among older women, especially those who have been betrayed, neglected, or emotionally abandoned in the past. And trust doesn't just mean being faithful. It means being emotionally reliable, present when it matters, able to hold space without judgment, and consistent with love even when moods change or life gets hard. Because trust is the bedrock of everything intimate and joyful, and without it, even the most passionate gestures fall flat. And this is why many grandmothers say that one of the most attractive qualities in a man over 60 is emotional steadiness. Not being perfect or always strong, but being honest, grounded, and real about where he stands, what he feels, and how he shows up for her. In a world that praises independence, many grandmas still crave healthy interdependence, where they can lean on someone without feeling like a burden, where they can be soft without being taken for granted. And many will confess that while they've learned to be strong on their own, they still want to be held, they still want to feel protected. Not in a way that strips away their independence, but in a way that says, I've got you, especially during moments of vulnerability, grief, illness, or change. And another secret desire that emerges over and over again is the craving for playfulness. Because aging doesn't mean losing your sense of humor or fun. In fact, it often becomes even more necessary as life becomes more serious. And grandmas light up when a man makes them laugh, teases them sweetly, dances with them in the kitchen, sends them flirty texts, or takes them on spontaneous outings to relive the carefree joy of their younger days. Because it reminds them that while the body may change, the soul never ages. And even more than sex, many women say they long for sensual connection, the kind of slow, explorative, patient physical intimacy that prioritizes pleasure over performance and presence over pressure. Because at this age, most women aren't chasing fireworks. They're craving warmth, closeness, and the kind of loving attention that makes their skin come alive. And they often wish their partners would understand that intimacy isn't something that starts in the bedroom. It starts with how they're spoken to, how often they're touched without an agenda, how emotionally connected they feel during the day, and how safe they feel expressing their needs. And if that emotional runway is set, the desire for deeper physical connection comes naturally. Because after 60, it's not about bodies being perfect, it's about bodies being respected, cherished, and explored without shame. And many grandmas admit they still fantasize, still dream, still want to feel attractive when they walk into a room, and still feel tingles when someone they care about leans in and whispers something just for them. And this craving for feeling special doesn't disappear after menopause. It intensifies because now they understand the value of time, the importance of presence, and the beauty of savoring each connection fully. And many will say they want to be romanced again, not with expensive gifts, but with handwritten notes, candlelit dinners at home, meaningful compliments, or even just being asked on a date with sincerity and effort, because it makes them feel like they matter, like they're not just aging out of visibility, but growing into a deeper kind of desirability that sees them for all they've become. And when a man acknowledges that with real admiration, she feels like a goddess, not in spite of her wrinkles or gray hair, but because of them, because those things tell a story of life lived fully, of resilience, nurturing, loving, and continuing to desire and be desired even in the most mature season of life. And what becomes increasingly clear as more grandmothers open up is that beneath the polite smiles and the poised wisdom of their years lies a deep and powerful desire to be seen not just as mothers or caregivers or retired citizens, but as full, passionate, emotionally alive women who still crave adventure, intimacy, affirmation, and yes, even excitement. Because contrary to outdated beliefs, life after 60 is not about winding down desire, but rather about redefining it, deepening it, and savoring it in its richest, most soulful forms. And many grandmas confess that one of the most thrilling things a man can offer them is novelty. Not reckless risk or wild surprises, but small, unexpected moments that break routine and reignite the senses, like cooking a new recipe together, exploring a nearby town they've never visited, trying a dance class, or even just watching the stars in silence with a cup of tea in hand, because these moments make her feel like life is still unfolding rather than fading. And what she really craves is a partner who's curious about the world, about her, about what makes her laugh and cry and light up, because curiosity breeds connection. And when a man continues to explore who she is, not just who she was, he reminds her that she's still becoming, still evolving, still worthy of attention and discovery. And this is why so many grandmas say they wish men over 60 would stop assuming they know everything about what a woman wants based on past relationships or outdated assumptions, and instead ask new questions, be playful in their exploration, and dare to be surprised by what turns her on emotionally and intellectually, because being wanted for her mind, for her wit, her humor, her creativity is just as arousing as being wanted for her body. And this shift from possession to appreciation is one of the most powerful changes that can revive connection later in life. Because when a man treats her not like a worn chapter, but like a freshly written story, she blooms. And along with appreciation comes another confession. Many grandmas crave compliments. Not flattery, but real, specific, thoughtful compliments that reflect what he truly sees in her. Because while society often tells older women to shrink or fade away, the man who notices the color of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she carries herself with quiet elegance, or how deeply she listens, reminds her that she is still visible, still radiant, still magnetic. And too often, men assume that because a woman has been self-sufficient for years, she no longer needs reassurance, when in fact the opposite is true. She may have grown strong for necessity, but that doesn't mean she doesn't long to be cherished, praised, and lifted up in love. And many grandmothers admit they still look in the mirror wondering if someone will tell them they're beautiful, not out of politeness, but out of genuine admiration. And even more than physical praise, they long to be complimented for their inner beauty, for their wisdom, their emotional intelligence, their compassion, their sense of humor, and their resilience. And when a man does this, when he genuinely admires her soul as much as her smile, it reignites her trust and intimacy and allows her to lower the walls she may have built over the years. Because many older women carry emotional scars from past relationships, some from neglect, some from betrayal, some from simply being taken for granted. And these emotional wounds don't just disappear with time. They soften when they're tended to. And many grandmas say they crave a man who's not afraid of their emotional history, but instead embraces it, listens to it, and offers a new narrative, one built on care, presence, and consistency. And in this way, healing becomes erotic, emotional safety becomes seductive, and shared vulnerability becomes the most intimate act of all. And while physical touch remains important, many women confess that after 60, the emotional foreplay is everything. The gentle buildup of trust, attentiveness, shared laughter, unhurried conversation, and the occasional flirtatious glance across the room that says, "I still want you." And in that slow dance of connection, a fire can burn brighter than it did decades ago, not because of youthful intensity, but because of emotional depth. And grandmothers often say they wish more men knew how sexy kindness is, how attractive empathy feels, how a small act of thoughtfulness, a text to check in, a blanket draped over her legs, a cup of coffee made just right, can mean more than grand gestures, because these are the things that say, "I see you, I know you, and I'm choosing to show up for you." And that feeling, that sense of being prioritized and remembered and considered, is one of the greatest desires that women over 60 quietly carry. And it isn't about needing a man to complete them. It's about wanting someone who complements their energy, respects their boundaries, and still makes them feel like someone's favorite. Someone worth the effort, the tenderness, the time. And it's this combination of presence, playfulness, appreciation, curiosity, and emotional safety that reignites a woman's desire to connect, to touch, to love again fully. And perhaps the most surprising confession of all is that many grandmas still crave deep, passionate, meaningful sex, not out of obligation, but as a form of shared joy, healing, and affirmation. And while the media may rarely portray older women as sensual beings, the truth is that for many, this chapter of life is when they feel the freest to enjoy intimacy without fear of pregnancy, without the pressures of youth, and with a fuller understanding of what their bodies truly enjoy. And they want a partner who is unafraid to explore this landscape with them, slowly, respectfully, passionately, and above all, together. And so, as these grandmothers speak with honest voices, softened by years of experience, but sharpened by deep self-awareness, what echoes most clearly is the quiet but powerful truth that their cravings are not rooted in fantasy or fleeting desire, but in the lifelong human need to feel wanted, chosen, and cherished. And while they may no longer be driven by the frantic pulse of youthful attraction, what they seek instead is something far more profound and enduring. A man who brings presence, not performance, who understands that true intimacy is not about youthful bodies colliding, but about souls pressing gently against each other, exchanging warmth and depth and laughter and truth. And many of these women confess they still fantasize about feeling feminine in a way that isn't diminished by age, about being looked at like a woman, not an elder, not a helper, not a has-been, but a woman with her own unique allure, her own energy, her own rhythm of seduction. Because being feminine isn't about wearing short skirts or makeup or pretending to be younger. It's about feeling seen and celebrated in the fullness of who she is now, gray hairs and all. And it's the man who can look at her with that kind of reverence who truly unlocks something fierce and beautiful inside her. Because that gaze, that look of sincere admiration, is what reignites her sense of self-worth. And she begins to carry herself differently, smile more often, speak with more confidence, and engage with more lightness, because deep down, she feels safe to be herself again. And many grandmas say they long for that kind of emotional and romantic sanctuary, a place where they don't have to compete or prove or hide, where they can bring their tenderness, their sensuality, and even their insecurities without being dismissed or judged. And this is why emotional intelligence becomes one of the most attractive traits in a man over 60. Not his wealth, not his physical fitness, but his ability to hold space for emotions, to listen with empathy, to sit in silence without rushing to fix or interrupt, and to be strong not by domination, but by gentleness, because real strength at this stage of life doesn't look like what it did in their 20s. It looks like emotional steadiness. It looks like patience. It looks like being able to hold someone's hand when they're vulnerable and whisper, "You don't have to do this alone." And that is what many women crave more than anything. A partner who is emotionally available, consistently reliable, and unafraid to be soft in his masculinity. Because in a world where men are often raised to suppress their emotions, the one who learns to express them truthfully, openly, gently, becomes magnetic to a woman seeking soulful connection. And that connection often extends far beyond romance into the realm of spiritual partnership, where two people grow not just old together, but wise, where they challenge and inspire each other to be better, to heal old wounds, to pursue joy, to live fully even in their later years. And this is something many grandmothers admit they desire but rarely say aloud. A man who grows with them, not away from them. Because aging isn't just about managing decline, it's about rewriting the script, deciding together what the next chapter looks like. And they crave a man who sees aging not as a barrier, but as a blessing, who finds beauty in her laugh lines, who thinks the stories etched into her skin are sexy, who wants to sit beside her not just on the porch swing, but on a plane to somewhere new, or in a class learning something together, or just across the dinner table sharing the mundane joys of life. And it's in those everyday moments that love deepens, not with fireworks, but with flickering candlelight that never burns out. And as their bodies change, what they desire most is someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't compare her to her younger self or to other women, but who leans in, touches her with reverence, and says, "I love who you are right now, exactly as you are." And many grandmas say that when a man approaches her body with curiosity, respect, and patience, he opens the door to some of the most pleasurable experiences of her life. Because now she knows what she likes, what she needs, what she no longer tolerates, and what makes her melt. And when intimacy becomes about mutual joy rather than performance, both partners relax, connect, and feel freer to express, explore, and receive. And the result is a form of lovemaking that transcends technique and becomes a shared language of presence, tenderness, laughter, and love. And yes, they want to be touched, to be kissed slowly, to be held tightly at night. But more than that, they want their hearts to be held, their silence to be understood, and their souls to be celebrated. And in that space, something beautiful happens. Desire doesn't fade with age. It refines, it deepens, it expands, and it becomes one of life's most sacred gifts, because the intimacy shared between two people who have truly lived, who have lost and loved and endured and healed, is more powerful than any fairy tale or fleeting fling. And that is what grandmas truly crave. Not perfection, not constant excitement, but real connection, authentic partnership, emotional depth, and daily reminders, spoken or unspoken, that they are still someone's treasure, still worthy of longing, still capable of being adored, admired, and desired. And for the men who are wise enough to offer that, not just with their words, but with their presence, an entire world of passion, intimacy, laughter, and lifelong companionship awaits, not behind them, but right here, right now, in the beautiful heart of this very season of life.